Welcome everyone to the video. Welcome to the channel. In this episode, got a great episode here. This will kind of wrap up the last few episodes. So you're going to hear a lot of this, similar concepts here that I've already talked about. But we're just going to kind of wrap things up here and then kind of go off in a different direction next week. But hope you enjoy the episode. Like the video if you like it. Maybe by hitting the thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you want to continue to see content from me regularly. But we're titling this one "Nobody Wants to Grow Up Anymore." And there was a time when becoming an adult actually meant something. It's not, being perfect, not having everything figured out in life, but it meant responsibility, sacrifice, emotional control, building something bigger than just yourself. But now we live in a world where people are, physically aging, but emotionally staying the same. People are terrified of commitment, terrified of responsibility, discomfort, terrified of sacrifice. Everybody wants freedom, but fewer people want the weight that actually comes with that. And maybe that's why so many people feel lost right now. Modern society has created something humanity has never really seen before. And, adults who never fully transitioned into adulthood. And, before anybody out there starts getting defensive, this episode is not about attacking younger generations. Honestly, I think this problem affects everyone now, older generations and younger generations, men or women, people who were online all the time or people who try to be as offline as possible. This is about what happens when an entire culture just starts avoiding the very things that once forced people to mature, because growth usually comes from pressure. And, modern life has become incredibly good at helping people avoid pressure. Years ago, adulthood came with many expectations. Again, not perfection, but expectations. You were expected to start to contribute to society or your small community, build stability, control your emotions, start to develop discipline. You start to learn how to handle difficult situations. You sacrifice for others. You start to think long term. And now a lot of those expectations are disappearing. Modern culture, it's telling people protect your peace, cut everyone off, do what feels good, never settle for anything, and always prioritize yourself. Now, obviously, some of those ideas are definitely healthy in moderation, but can be taken way too far. And you end up with a culture where responsibility itself starts feeling oppressive. Sacrifice feels just unfair. Commitment, restrictive. Discomfort, completely unacceptable. And honestly, social media really amplifies this dramatically because now people compare their real responsibilities to someone else's curated freedom. You're sitting at work exhausted, watching influencers travel the world. They're eating expensive food. They wake up whenever they want, live with really no visible responsibility. And eventually people start associating adulthood with failure. Like somehow being responsible meant you lost. And that's incredibly dangerous because responsibility is actually what gives people structure. It gives them a purpose. It gives them an identity. Without responsibility, people just simply start drifting. Human beings historically matured through pressure. Pressure created resilience. Responsibility created discipline, and struggle created perspective. But modern life removes friction constantly. Are you hungry? How easy is to order food nowadays? Do you feel lonely? There's a lot of apps you can use to not feel lonely. Are you just simply bored? There's so many ways to, get on social media. There's videos, so much you can scroll through. Are you sad? You can easily distract yourself. And if you feel rejected, there's easy ways to move on to the next person instantly. Everything now is designed to minimize discomfort, put everything at your fingertips. But discomfort used to teach people things. Failure taught, rejection, responsibility taught people things. Now people avoid uncomfortable experiences so aggressively that many never emotionally develop beyond that. And, you know, look at online behavior. People collapse emotionally over disagreement now. It's not even real conflict. It's simply just a disagreement. Somebody disagrees politically, you block them. Anybody criticizes you, you just cut 'em off. Somebody challenges your worldview and they become toxic. Now, there are definitely toxic people out there, but modern culture increasingly treats discomfort itself as danger. And that's not healthy because emotionally mature adults are supposed to tolerate discomfort. That's a part of adulthood. And I honestly think that, you know, this is a part of why anxiety feels so overwhelming today. People are losing their tolerance for pressure, not because humans are weaker, biologically weaker, because modern life trains people to escape pressure and escape it instantly. This might not be the biggest, uh, contradiction in modern society. Everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants financial freedom, emotional freedom, freedom within their relationships, career freedom in your career, freedom to do whatever they want when they want. But freedom without responsibility eventually creates just emptiness because responsibility gives life weight. Think about the moments in life people are most proud of, raising your children, building up businesses, taking care of your family, helping people survive difficult times, just creating a stable life. None of those things are easy. They all require sacrifice. But modern culture increasingly is treating sacrifice like a failure. And honestly, a lot of people now are terrified of anything permanent. Marriage, children, career, a permanent home, any long-term commitments. People want escape routes from everything. And social media just reinforces this mindset continuously. Never settle. Always keep upgrading. Protect your options. Don't let anything hold you back. But eventually you reach a point where keeping every door open creates a life where you never fully walk through any of those doors. The line right there, I think, describes modern adulthood perfectly. People are terrified of choosing because choosing then means responsibility, and responsibility opens up risk. One of the strangest things about modern culture is that emotional instability now gets rewarded publicly. Outrage gets instant engagement. Drama draws all our attention. Victimhood gets, validation. Public breakdowns just generate views. Years ago, emotional regulation was considered maturity. Now, public emotional reactions often they become content. They become, views, and that translates to money. Algorithms love it because emotional content spreads faster than calm content. And that's very important. The internet's not rewarding emotional maturity, it rewards emotional intensity, which means millions of people are subconsciously learning the louder the reaction, the more attention that you will receive. And honestly, I think this affects everybody, psychologically more than we realize. People begin performing emotions instead of processing them. Everything becomes externalized. Every single thought we have, our frustrations, issues in our relationships, every emotional breakdown, broadcasted consistently. And when people live publicly like that long enough, they stop developing internal emotional stability because internal stability is built privately. It's built through reflection, through silence, responsibility, through failures and experience. Not through constant, validation loops that online. I think deep down, a lot of modern society is afraid of adulthood itself because adulthood means accepting uncomfortable truths. that life is not always fair. People will disappoint you. Responsibilities become very, very exhausting. You will sacrifice many, many things in your life. Time starts to move faster, not literally move faster, but the way we perceive it starts moving faster. You cannot avoid suffering completely. That realization used to mature people. Now, many people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to escape it instead through entertainment, just consumption, simple distractions, validation, escapism. And again, I'm not saying people shouldn't enjoy life. That's not the point. The point is when escapism becomes someone's primary lifestyle, you know, it simply stop, growth starts to stop. And I think a lot of people feel trapped right now because deep down, they know this. You can distract yourself endlessly, but, eventually reality does catch up. Bills, aging, eventual loneliness, purpose, responsibility. Start thinking about the meaning to your life. At some point, every human being has to confront these things. And modern society has become incredibly good at delaying that confrontation. The uncomfortable possibility maybe, people do not feel empty because life is too difficult. Maybe people feel empty because, you know, modern culture removed too much responsibility. If you really think about it, responsibility forces people outward toward family, community, discipline, sacrifice, everything we've been talking about. Without responsibility, people often collapse inward into consumption, overthinking, isolation, and just endless self focus. And maybe that's why so many people feel mentally lost despite having more comfort than almost any generation before them. Comfort alone does not create meaning. Purpose usually comes from carrying weight. And that's what maturity actually is. It's not an age, weight, responsibility, sacrifice, the ability to endure difficult things and still moving forward. Maybe adulthood was never supposed to feel easy. Maybe the struggle itself was part of becoming human. And maybe modern society accidentally convinced people that the goal of life was avoiding discomfort entirely. But a life without responsibility, without pressure, without sacrifice may also become a life without meaning. And maybe, that's the real crisis, modern society is facing right now. Not that people are incapable of growing up, but that the modern world, made staying emotionally young feel a lot more comfortable than becoming fully mature adult humans. Uh, Yeah, thanks for listening, and I hope, these last few episodes, there may be some redundancy there, but, it really does, I think this really does wrap everything up here, and then we'll kinda go off in a different direction, but, I hope this helps. I hope, this really hits home for people out there. Definitely drop comments down below, let me know what you think, and we'll see you in the next video.